All right, hello everybody. This video is on chapter 21, America and the Great War. Let me share my notes with you now. Um, so we're really talking about World War One when we talk about the Great War, and just some interesting aspects. You guys know we have 4 years, 1914 to 1918. A lot of changes are going to happen to World War One. I mean, Europe itself is going to change a lot. The border lines and everything like that, and new countries and old countries are going to change. U.S. more government control over the economy and taxes, debt, civil rights, minorities. Aftermath will lead to 2 decades of American isolation, turn the U.S. into the world's biggest economic power, and the end of World War One sows the seeds for the beginning of World War Two. So here is what Germany or what Europe looks like at the beginning of World War One. How did it start? How do you know? First of all, we got to go back to nationalism. You know, the pride in your nation being superior. One of the things that happened is during the imperialism era, um, there was a lot of competition over nationalism, and it was a big a deal to prove your superiority. Now, one of the leading countries, Austria-Hungary, now their issue with nationalism as this pride in yourself is happening. If you are a land that has people from other places, they're gonna have pride in them in their location and not so much in the country that they're in. So you have all these ethnic groups in Austria-Hungary, and some of these places are not attached to Austria-Hungary, even though they're part of that country. So when all of this fever of your country is, having pride in it, they don't feel that pride. In fact, they feel that pride in their own um, part, like almost like their own state. And in that, that may mean that they want to be their own country. Okay. Um, these economic rivals and imperialism also play a role. You see, in the U.S., we had Puerto Rico and Hawaii, but in Europe, countries were really close together, and so little countries, um, they were seen as the prize for bigger countries. And the problem is that, like, if you attack a small country that's next to a big country, that big country might start thinking, well, are you going to try to attack me like next? Okay. And with that comes the alliance system where, with that fear of being attacked, you start reaching out and making friends and making alliances. Okay. And then also you start building up your military as well. And, when you have a lot of toys, basically you want to go and play. And the flashpoint of the war is when one of these small ethnic groups of the Serbian nationalists wanted to be their own country from Austria-Hungary, and they assassinate one of the leading figures of that country. Okay, now Serbian people that were part of Austria-Hungary and in and out of it along the borders, they here's the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. They were seen as the culprits and everything like that. So the Serbians reached out to their ethnic neighbors, the Russians, okay, the Slavic people. All right, and in that they had an alliance, and when they were attacked as retaliation, uh, it led to Russia declaring war on Russia, had an alliance with France. That meant that France declared war on Austria-Hungary, but Austria-Hungary had an alliance with Germany. And next thing you know, it's like a royal rumble. England gets involved in the war as well. And just that's how kind of everything kind of collapses. Now the fighting in Europe is an interesting point because this is it's different than the Spanish American War, which was still a very old school war, only 15 years earlier. So this war, you're gonna see a lot, a lot more technology. First airplanes for this first time, machine guns, submarines, poison gas, tanks. Um, you have a lot, and with more weapons comes, different tactics and also the more dead. With machine guns, trench warfare, trenches, you're digging holes because hey, I can't fight you straight up anymore. Now you got a machine gun. I better dig a hole and hide. And when that happens, you dig a hole. Next thing you know, it's 100 miles of holes dug, and your enemy is on one side and you're on the other side, and nobody moves for months. So this was a very slow moving war in that regard. Okay, when it came to trench warfare. And with that came trench foot, disease of the trenches, when water, mud, dirt, all the trash from other soldiers, the food, rats. So you had all of these um, issues in the trenches. It's also because of that the stalemate becomes scientists come out with poison gas and the beginning of chemical weapons to try to get an edge. Airplanes are not really used so much as fighting this war like they would in World War II. They're not that great yet. Remember, the Wright brothers plane was 1903, so we're looking at 1914 to 1918. But we're getting there. We're seeing the changes. Now, how did America go to war? Why did they get involved? Okay, in fact, as this war starting in 1914, by the 1916 election, Woodrow Wilson, who's going to run for re-election, his slogan is "He kept us out of war." Like, that's how he justify getting reelected. Look, we're not in war. The war's over there. Okay. But things kind of start dragging into the US way. There's cultural ties with England, for example. There's a lot of yellow journalism at the time, and there was also, Allied propaganda. Central powers were isolated. That's Germany, Austria Hungary. Like, we didn't have a connection with them. Okay, and then the last one, German submarine warfare, when they sink a couple of our ships. Um, um, Here's some of the propaganda. Now, the German submarines. One of the flashpoints was the sinking the Lusitania. Now, the Lusitania was a passenger ship going from New York to England, and before the ship sailed, the German embassy said, "Look, don't go over to Europe. It's a war zone." Okay. Um, England has a blockade on us, meaning they're going to shoot down any ship that comes into Germany by the North Sea and the up there. And at the same time, we're going to sink ships that are coming into England. Now, I know this is a passenger ship, but we're not taking any chance. Like we're warning you. Anyway, the ship sinks. Ship is torpedoed by a German U-boat, a German submarine. Okay, and the Lusitania probably did have some weapons on board to help the English, but it was a passenger ship, and a thousand people are gonna die. Um, Germany then pledges no more attacks, but they're losing. They're losing. They're getting suffocated by the British blockade. They're losing when they're like, look, if we take away that pledge and we attack any and all ships, we'll win this war. Okay, it's kind of do or die right now. You got to go all in. And that's when Germany asked for the help of Mexico. Okay, seeing the U.S. increasingly involved in helping England and increasingly involved in getting the war, be like, look, Mexico, if you help us fight the U.S., when the war is over, we'll give you territory that you lost to the U.S. Places like Arizona, Mexico, New Mexico, things like that, Texas. Okay, uh, um, so that was the promise of the Zimmerman telegram. And with that and other ships being sunk, the U.S. declared war in 1917. So it's really only going to be over a year of the war, like probably like a year and a half. Okay, that the U.S. is in this war, and the whole goal of the change from the election was, well, now we have to make the world safe for democracy. Okay, and first you have to mobilize. You got to get ready for a war that you weren't ready for. You have to have a draft. This is where you get the beginning of conscientious objectors, people who don't want to fight, for all sorts of reasons, mainly religious. You have to have propaganda. Teach people about the war and have them on our side of people, especially like people like the anti-imperialists who didn't want to get involved. Okay, you have to mobilize a wartime economy, and one of the ways they really raised money is by buying bonds. Bonds is I put it like, when you take out a loan, you owe the bank money, and you have to pay them interest. That's how they get all their money. Now, a bond is you're the bank and the government is asking you for money. And so you let them borrow money, they pay you back with a certificate of a bond, and the longer it takes for the longer you have it, the more money you make in interest. So that helped pay for the war. What about our civil rights, our civil liberties? We had issues going on with the war. Two laws that were passed, the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. The Espionage Act, they allowed the government to read the mail, and the Sedition Act allowed you to, made it a crime to make a disloyal statement about the government, the flag, or the Constitution. 2,000 people would be arrested, especially members of the Socialist Party. Why read your mail? Thing is that people were sending a lot of little postcards in the mail, just kind of, you see, like during now, like election season, um, telling people why they shouldn't join the draft. Okay, why they don't have to. Okay, and one of them was sent by a guy by the name of Charles Schenck, and he was like, "You have the right in a free country not to serve if you don't want to." Well, the government put him in jail because you're hurting the war in that regard. You're hurting the soldiers that are fighting because maybe they don't have enough support if people are hitting the draft. So that was the rationale. Okay, involved in Schenck versus U.S. And at the end, the court sided with the government and just basically said, look, when you talk about negative about the government during a time of war, when you talk negative about the draft, it's essentially saying fire in a movie theater. Your speech is limited because you're causing a public hazard, a public panic. Okay, and that was what the government had decided. In one regard, people were like, "Well, what about the free speech, the First Amendment? I'm just voicing my opinion." The court said there's a limit if it imposes a clear and present danger. so far as that talking negatively about the war to the court at that moment meant a clear and present danger. What about women and minorities? Women took the jobs of men that left to fight, and this is going to be a big deal in the suffrage movement, of getting the right to vote, because as women become leaders in the workplace and heads of households, that added responsibility, that added those duties also came with it, freedoms, or the seeking those freedoms, especially at the moment, was the right to vote. Okay, so World War One helps women get that right to vote, because you can't see women as just in the house, housewives anymore, when they are in the factories, um, helping the war. Okay, minorities, people like German Americans, they're going to be discriminated against. Native Americans are going to fight during the war, help get the right to citizenship. Jewish Americans as well. Um, African Americans are going to be able to fight during the war in segregated units. Also, they're not allowed, they're actually going to get thrown out there first to fight with the French. See, the French had an idea like, okay, come and help us. Americans were like, okay, we're going to come, but we're going to come fight us together under our own generals, but we'll send you the black troops for you. You could have them, and when they did that, this is going to be a big deal in the future. Well, these Black Americans fight bravely and win awards, like the Harlem Hellfighters, and the French treat them with respect and dignity. And it's going to play a big role in afterwards when they come back and they don't feel that in America. And that's when you're going to get into the 1920s and things like the Harlem Renaissance and like that. Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, the labor shortage, and the Great Migration as well. Now, what do you mean? This is a big term, the Great Migration. This vacuum led to people moving from the South, African Americans leaving the Jim Crow South to go north for these factory jobs that are opening up, because so many men had left to join the war. At the end of the war, what do you get is a socialist takeover of Russia. This is our beginning of the end of communism as an actual national threat. When the socialists take over Russia and the Bolshevik Revolution, they get out of the war, and the labor unions take over the country. Okay, 10 million U.S. troops reach Europe. Germany surrenders in 1918. That's how we have Veterans Day today. It's November 11th because that's the day that World War One was over. Okay, 117,000 Americans are gonna die in this war too. Wilson, time he comes out of this war and he's like, look, we need to have a world organization, okay? And in the Treaty of Versailles, he says we need a League of Nations to stop wars before they start. But it became difficult for the U.S. to join the League of Nations. I'll get to that in a second. He was 14 points. In that treaty that ended the war, Germany was really punished harshly. This is going to lead to World War II. They had to admit that it was their fault, and then when admitting it was their fault, that even though Austria-Hungary started the war, Germany kind of like persuaded them as the bigger power. Even though that was the case, Germany is going to have to pay reparations. They're going to have to pay for the damages of the war, and England and France are going to be big part of trying to squeeze Germany into paying for what they did. Okay. That and then it means loss of territory for Germany as well. Austria-Hungary is going to be broken up. Um, Turkey, which was also part of the Central Powers, is going to have be overthrown. Their government, at least. Okay, League of Nations does start as a peace organization, but once you get into the U.S., the Senate has to approve of these treaties, and the Senate rejected our President Woodrow Wilson's treaty to start the League of Nations. Why? Because there was a big deal about getting out of European drama. Okay, the League of Nations was one of those. Hey, look, if you're part of the league, if we're in one big alliance, if one person attacks, then we all gotta go. We all gotta go in. And the United States, that type of coalition was not really popular. People wanted to return into isolationism and have our own thing here. As far as Florida, this is where you see the rise of Pensacola as a big naval air base. Key West becomes a base. Tampa and Jacksonville build allied ships. So the military momentum in the Spanish-American War with Tampa and the Rough Riders and Theodore Roosevelt continue here in Florida. I mean, when it comes to airplanes, it was simple. Better weather, no mountains. It was a perfect place to train aircraft, and these bases are still there today. Okay, guys, that's the end of this chapter. Thank you very much.